Welcome to the podcast. So, on this podcast, we talk to people who are involved in the American real estate market, particularly the multifamily apartment space. This is something that I've had an interest in for a long time, and I have some aspirations and goals about owning apartments, about buying apartments. I've already bought some apartments up in Chicago, but I'm going to continue that journey, and we're going to have different guests on each week. So this week's guest is a guy who has a lot in common with me. He's originally from Australia. He's transitioned to America. He started off buying small complexes, and he has some very interesting stories about the different deals he did originally. He then transitioned into buying some multifamily deals. He currently owns and controls 2,500 apartments, has $350 million under management, and has a thriving business which is expanding into the future. So welcome to the show, Reed Goossens.
Thank you for that, Peter.
Yeah, you're welcome, mate. It's great to see you on here. We'll have you on the show, and you have a really unique and interesting experience. You've lived in Australia, you're now in America, and we want to really go through that journey that you've had.
Sure.
And just learn about say what some of the pitfalls were and what you've learned and the differences between, say, investing in the US and in Australia. So to start with, let's go back a little bit and go back to when you're in Australia. You're from Queensland, that's right?
That's correct. Yes, from the Sunshine Coast.
Okay, cool. So Noosa or?
That's it, Noosa on the sunny coast.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, we do in one of our other businesses. We are having a real run of people buying properties in that Sunshine Coast area at the moment. It's a very, fast-growing, popular spot.
Yep.
There's some great affordability in some of the properties up there as well with people in Sydney and Melbourne. Talk us through like what you did back there.
Sure, yeah. So we obviously grew up in on the Sunshine Coast. I went to the University of Queensland. I got a degree in structural engineering. And when I graduated in 2007, that was, had the bug to travel like most Aussies. And I went straight abroad to London and was in London working on the 2012 Olympic Games, but in 2008 for all the infrastructure projects, being a structural engineer.
Yep.
And that was sort of the first time leaving Australia. I was away for 2 years, and in the second year that I was away, I actually went to the south of France, and I was a yachty on the big super yachts. I worked for a big Russian billionaire, and gallivanting around the south of France. I crossed the Atlantic Ocean on this super yacht, and then I backpacked through America at that point in the end of 2009, and that's where I met my now wife, Erica, who is American. So met her in Spain when I was on the yachts. But really had 2 years, 2 incredible years traveling around the world, experiencing, life living in London, then down to the south of France, living on these super yachts, working for Russian billionaires, crossing the Atlantic Ocean, falling in love, and then really realizing at the same time falling in love with New York City as well. I really, really loved New York City when I was backpacking through there. And so I'm then back in Australia in early 2010, back in my, job in a cubicle, and I just thinking to myself, like, geez, I've just had an incredible 2 years. I'm 2 years out of uni, and I'm stuck in a cubicle now. Is this what I'm going to be doing for the next 40, 50 years of my life? And I just thought, this can't be it. So that was really a passion. So the spark that ignited within me to say, okay, I want to do more with my life. But I felt like sort of a star athlete, sitting on the sidelines, watching my sort of life go by, being in this cubicle. So picked up the book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And that's really where the journey started in the real estate game. I didn't even know what the word entrepreneurship meant. I just wanted to, have someone pay me to live my life. And that's really where it started way back in 2010.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I've spent a lot of time in Europe, particularly the south of France myself, and I can really relate to your story. I'm guessing being a Noosa boy, everything there would have been great except for no surf.
No surf, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, no. Look, love Noosa, but Noosa's also a big, small country town. You know what I mean? It's you grow out of it pretty quickly, and it's great to go home and see it every now and then. But I could probably never live there because it just doesn't have the hustle and bustle. That I want.
Not enough challenge for somebody like you. Exactly. It's funny too, like the Rich Dad Poor Dad it is a terrific book that, a lot of entrepreneurs, it's one of the kind of like Bibles for entrepreneurship. And I kind of think too that a lot of entrepreneurs, they have something, like they have a passion for whether it's surfing or even just spending time with their wife or their children or whatever. And then they decide, okay, what I'm currently doing is not going to allow me to do what I want. So what I'm going to do, so then they concentrate on, this is what I want to do. Now I've got to create something that funds that I want to do. Was that your 100%, experience?
100%. Well, coming back from 2 years abroad, it was just like, how can I get someone to pay me to keep traveling? You know what I mean? Like that was sort of what it was. And again, not really buying into the whole, you've got to be in this job for the next, or this career that you went to uni for the next 40, 50 years of your life. I thought, geez, shoot me now. Like it was just not, it didn't really, I love study engineering, but I didn't love the actual engineering, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, but in saying that, and a lot of people probably listening to this show, like, I used engineering as a stepping stone to absorb as much information as I could, as much skill set as I could, so I could then use it to move overseas, to get a job in New York, to get, and we'll talk about that. But that also then helped me get a job with a real estate developer, which we can get into here in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And that it was all these stepping stones. So don't, I've always thought about, you want to quit your job tomorrow and just go, sail off into the sunset, but it actually takes a long period of time. And as I picked up Rich Dad Poor Dad in 2010, I actually didn't quit my day job until 2017. And that was all with visas and green cards and all that sort of stuff. But it took a long period of time before I could, and I was doing side hustles, like doing deals on the side up until that point.
Yeah.
But what I'm trying to get at is that it takes a long period of time. And so many people, when they get started on this journey towards financial freedom and independence, they think it's going to happen in a year, and it doesn't. And so many people give up after a year or 2 years of trying because they think it's going to happen super quickly. But it actually, to create financial freedom and replace your income from your day job, takes a long bloody period of time. It takes hustle, it takes mindset, it takes grit and determination, and there's some dark days, but you got to keep pushing through that. And so many people give up because they didn't have the right mindset on the front end. And I think that's, when I look back at what I've quote unquote achieved in the last 10 years, that's probably been the biggest thing that I just the old saying that Tony Robbins says is like, you can overestimate what you can achieve in a year, but you can underestimate what you can achieve in a decade. And looking back a decade ago, I was 24 years of age. I'm giving away my age right now. I wasn't even in the States. I was still gallivanting around the south of France. So, 10 years later, I'm on a podcast going to be talking about all the assets I own. And in 10 years time, when I'm 44, it's going to be a completely different story, it's more in trying to enjoy that journey as well. And use it as your story and your bit of your, inspiration to keep inspiring other people. And that's hopefully what people can get out of this show is that, I'm not here to brag or anything. I'm here to try to inspire. And that's my message.
Yeah. And it's a very inspirational message. It's interesting too. You raised a point there that I had a guy on a podcast I did last week, and this guy, he's like a social media king. Like he's had, I think it's now 20 billion views of his videos on social media. Yeah. So he's a king, and he is actually doing a bit of a brand shift at the moment. So the type of stuff he's doing, he's kind of got to the point where he's gone, that's no longer my purpose. I want to actually get into more inspiring people, showing the lifestyle, that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And he told me that he'd spoken to one of his mentors, and that mentor said, just dump what you're doing and just get into the new stuff. And I said to him, well, that's certainly, there's validity in that, but you've got across his social media platforms, he has between 10 and 20 million followers.
That's all incredible.
Yeah. So I said, what we might try and do with you is rather than dump them and try something new, and then it might work or it might not, why don't we try and convert, even if we bring 10%, that's 2 million people into your new sort of more highly monetized area. And I hear what you're saying with it. It's, you don't have to give up what's already working. You've just got to migrate from what's not working to what you ideally want to have happen. And that sounds like what you've done.
Yeah, look, but it's also, that gentleman sounds like he's an incredible, unique situation. We have 20 million followers. It's pretty easy to convert 10% of them to do this new venture and make good money. But for the average person out there listening to this show, when they're in a day job, they've got the kids, they're trying to keep food on the table, they're trying to keep fit and healthy, they're trying to have a relationship with their better half. It's a lot of work, right? And you're trying to do a side hustle on this as well. Like it's a lot of spinning plates. And what I'm getting at is it took me 8 years to get to a place where I was like, see you later job. Yeah. But in that 8 years, I used my career as a stepping stone to help me get into a position where I was surrounded by real estate 24/7. So I had a day job working as a real estate developer here in Los Angeles because I had a skill set in structural engineering. So I used that skill set to bunny hop into an industry where I could have the highest paying corporate job, and I was learning on the job, right? Yeah. And I was also doing my side hustle as well, which was also on real estate. So 24/7, and it got me in that mindset in that. So yes, I say I quit my job in 2017, but I was 5 years prior to that, also 4 years prior to that, I was constantly in it 24/7. And still, I'm in 24/7 now, but now I eat what I kill because the responsibility is on my shoulders rather than, a paycheck.
Yeah. So just stepping back a little bit, did you know much about real estate or have an interest or anything when you were in Australia?
So that Rich Dad Poor Dad was the spark, right? And that's when as soon as I read that book, I was like, this is it. And some people ask me, why didn't you get into stocks or something? And I said, well, look, it's not being a structural engineer, I was building stuff. My dad, he was just a high school teacher. He was a principal at my local high school. He'd had a bit of success in investing in Aussie real estate, right? And had sort of moved from lower middle class to upper middle class over a period of my upbringing. And made a couple of $1 million in buying really good houses in the Sunshine Coast. You know what I mean? So, he had success, and I was like, that's it. It's real estate. That's what I sort of, it's in my blood. I've seen my dad do it, and he didn't do anything crazy. He just was smart with his money, and that's what I was attracted to. So. So I did start attending events in Australia, in Brisbane actually, and to this day, I think the Brisbane Property Network, if you don't know what it is, BPNI, is the leading networking event in Australia. And back in 2010, it was sort of very fresh, but it's still today, I think it's one of the only ones in Australia where I come to New York City and there's these REIA events, which are called Real Estate Investment Associations, and they're in every single city across the United States. I was just so blown away, like, wow, you've got this incredible network of people that are in these associations. I didn't come from that. And so when I got to New York City, and I'm sort of jumping ahead a little bit here, but it was just like the comparison back to what I had in Australia was so, I was lucky that I lived in Brisbane because there was one in Brisbane that I could go in and start learning about stuff and, flipping houses or doing lease options or doing something, splitter blocks or something like that we could get into. But when I came to America, just the absolute, availability to information with relatively little cost to entry. I remember getting pitched in Aussie, back in Australia, those Brisbane property networks, like gurus for $15,000, $20,000 to teach me this stuff. Yet I was getting it taught on a stage for $20 entry fee at a local New York REIA when I got to, because there was just so much more people and there was so much more competition that they had to give it away for free. So to come back to the original question, yes, I got started in Australia. Didn't actually do anything in Oz, but I had the will and the want to move back overseas and be an expat and live in New York City. The girlfriend, Erica, at the time was American. So we said, screw it, at 2011. Quit my job in Australia and I moved to New York City. I didn't have a job lined up. And that was the sort of, it was just more of a scratch. That, people ask, like, why'd you do it? And I said, well, I would hate to, I fear regret, right? And regret is such a driving thing in my life that even if I didn't succeed in New York and I failed and I didn't get a job and I had to move back to Australia, at least when I wake up when I'm 70 years of age, I can say, at least I had a crack, at least I had a go at it. And that's the most important thing. You had a go, you gave it your all, but it's okay that you failed, but at least you didn't sit on your hands and do nothing and dream about it. You went out and gave it a good shake of the horse's tail, as they say.
Yeah, like there is a saying, and I'm kind of paraphrasing it a bit, but it's something like the pain of the regret of failing at something is about 1% of the pain of regret of not trying it.
Yeah, love it.
Yeah,
exactly that, right? And so So you ask, getting involved in real estate. No, I was learning a lot in Australia, consuming, going to do something. I was working as a civil engineer, structural engineer, so I had some savings. I was going to do a fix and flip.
Yep.
But then I was like, look, the girlfriend had just finished her studies in Australia. She wanted to move back to the States. I really wanted to move to New York City and just be an expat because I wanted to live there at some period of my life. And I said, This is the perfect opportunity. I was 26. Let's get going. And I rocked up. This is new relationship. Didn't even have a job lined up. I was on a tourist visa, and I went door to door knocking on every single engineering firm until someone said yes. And there was a lot of no's. It was no. Boom. Someone said yes.
Yeah.
One person happened to be an expat as well, and he sympathized with I was an expat, and I got a visa. And as I say, the rest is history. So
yeah, so let's talk about that then. So you're in Australia. You're qualified as an engineer. You're doing your engineering work. It's not really for you. You've obviously have this streak of adventure that's gonna, you're gonna jump across the line and then look back and go, oh well, I just did that. Rather than, I'm sure you contemplated what you were doing, but you're not letting the gap between what you want and where you're at stop you. You're jumping across that gap. So you're, taking on that fear face on.
Mm-hmm.
Then you land in New York City. You're starting to, and I mean, like New York, it's got a pulse of its own.
It will eat you alive.
Yeah, like it's funny, like New York, a lot of people say like New York's such an expensive place. And yeah, sure, it is expensive to live in New York, but it's actually cheap as well because there's so much going on that you can just walk around for weeks and be entertained just by what's going on around you. Mm-hmm. So it can be comparatively cheap in that sense as well. So you get to New York, you're knocking on doors, and then you land the job as an engineer. So what was happening on the real estate side then?
Yep. So, get an apartment that was sort of roof over the head. Try and figure out the day job, and I was hadn't got the day job sorted out yet. Yeah, because I think 3 or 6 months to get that day job because I was on that tourist visa.
Yeah,
but literally within 2 weeks of being fresh off the boat, I was at my first RIA event, the Real Estate Investment Associations, and that was I remember still in Pennsylvania Avenue, in Pennsylvania Hotel on the 47th floor, and was just again, it still sends shivers down my spine. Just going to these things, paying $20 at the door, and 100 people are there, all interested in real estate. All in my shoes, maybe can't afford New York real estate, but can afford Baltimore or Philadelphia or these outlying cities. And that's where I realized, I thought, excuse me if I'm going to swear, I thought, shit, I could buy a property in the United States in a secondary and tertiary market for $30,000.
Yeah.
Like that's ridiculous. And it was a 4-hour drive away from New York City. I was like, you can't even get that in Australia.
Yeah. So you get a garage.
So I just didn't, you got the, New York and LA and San Francisco, that's like Australia. It's the same property type, negatively geared, high appreciation. But then there was these secondary and tertiary markets that I was like, wow, 30, 40,000. I can afford that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And when I got off, when I started learning, it took me about 6 months to sort of really get my head wrapped around the American lingo and understanding what they meant by, IRR, cash on cash return, expenses, insurance, the entity structuring stuff. Like there was all this stuff that I was learning.
Yeah.
And I remember being like my nose stuck in a book on the subway on the way to work and just thinking, I need to take freaking action here.
Yeah.
And I picked through the property networking events. I met another expat who was doing some stuff up in Syracuse, New York, which was about a 4-hour drive away. And I remember on every, probably one Saturday a month, I would jump on the Greyhound bus and get a direct bus up to Syracuse. Yep. I would get a broker would pick me up from the bus station, would go and tour 4, 5, 6 little properties, and I'd get in the bus and be back for a beer with the boys on Saturday night.
Yeah,
right. That was, again, the pushing. You talk about the gap. I knew that I wanted to start owning real estate. I got to the point, and at that point, Peter, I'd probably been educating myself for probably 2 years at that point.
Yeah.
So because there was the Australian, I include the Australian part, and this was middle of 2012. And remember, I picked up the book Rich Dad Poor Dad in early 2010. So I'd been consuming a lot, and I just knew that I was never going to get, it's got a point where I just didn't need to spend any more money on education. I just needed to go and do it.
Execute something.
I needed to jump in the deep end. And the thing for me, you talk about jumping that gap. It was, okay, what could go wrong here? Well, it's my money. If I lose it, it was a $40,000 investment. chalk it up to a bit of education.
Sure.
I'd learnt enough that I felt confident, and I'd learnt enough about the market that I'd seen others be successful, and I was using their blueprints as a sort of pathway to quote unquote success to get that first one done. So again, understanding if I was comfortable with those outcomes, then let's go do it. And again, to all those listeners out there that jump in that gap, it's if you can get comfortable with the worst case scenario that can happen from any decision that you make, and you're okay with it, go and do it. That's what it is, pushing those boundaries and going, sitting with the worst case. Worst case, I could lose this $40,000. Okay. Am I going to be homeless? No. Am I still going to have my girlfriend? Yes. Am I still going to have a roof over my head? Yes. Am I still going to have a job? Yes. All right, let's go do it.
Yeah, I think that Richard Branson, that's his philosophy, is that he'll attend meetings and he'll get pitched all kinds of different things, and he walks away from everything and he sits by himself and he goes, could I deal with total failure on this? Mm-hmm. And if the answer is yes, he goes ahead and does it.
Yep,
and
exactly.
Yeah. So that's a great point. So what did you buy something up in Syracuse?
Yep, in Syracuse. It was for my first property. It was a triplex for $38,000.
Wow.
And he is, here is the fresh-eyed, bushy-tailed Australian who had no idea about Section 8 housing, about Class D, the ghetto. It was a lesson learnt. It was great on paper. For the first 6 months, I was cash flowing probably $700-800 a month, which is a great little profit. And then there was a drive-by shooting because the son of one of the tenants was in a local gang, and two of the tenants moved out. And I quickly realized that if you're going to invest in these low-income housing, you probably need to buy 4, 5, 6 of them, right? They're so cheap that you need to buy a lot of them to diversify the risk. Yeah. And looking back, I can say that with all the experience I have today, but in the time, it was just sort of like, oh God, it was quite stressful. But that property, because I bought it all cash, I went and I created a relationship with the local bank. And I said, look, I'm depositing rental checks. You can see I've been depositing them. Can I get a line of credit for $25,000? Yeah. And they said, sure, here's $25,000. And I had saved up a little bit more money from my day job. And I actually bought another property, a duplex for $40,000, again, all cash. And I got to deal number 2. And then from there, I got to deal number 3. And again, that first deal is the best deal because it gets you going, even though it was not a smooth sale. I drive-by shooting. I have issues with my tenants. I ended up having to sell that thing within 2 years of owning it, but it got me going, got me off the starting blocks. And you don't get to deal number 10 without doing deal number 1. And that's so important with anything you do in business or real estate. You just got to get off the starting block and take that action.
Yeah, that is so true. And people sometimes get tied up too much in the actual transaction. Yeah. So they look at it and go, oh yeah, I spent whatever it is, 30, 40,000 on this. But they don't realize for the 30, 40,000 by executing that transaction, like you said, you do things like you meet the local bank, you develop a relationship with an attorney, you start to meet, property inspectors. You've got the local real estate brokers notice that you're buying something. So then they start bringing deals to you.
Yes. So yes. The property managers, everyone in your team, keep going.
Yeah. So it's not just the transaction itself. There's a lot of intangibles that occur around a transaction just by entering into the transaction.
Yes. And then once you close, the social proof that you're not doing social proof, the mindset shift that you have said, you said to yourself, I've done it. I did it. I closed on this property. Look at me. Like I thought I'd never be able to do this. And look where I am now. I've closed on my first ever real estate deal. Yeah. And I still remember to this day, not that it was anything to write home about. It was a $38,000 piece of crap, but it gave me the confidence to go off and do deal number 2 and then deal number 3. And that's all. It's that little spark that just gets you from that education phase to the action phase and the execution phase, which is so important because in real estate, there's going to be good deals. There's going to be bad deals, right? Yeah, and you're going to have your ups and downs, and the market's going to be the market. We just had COVID, and we can talk a lot about that as well, but there's just going to be outside factors you can't control, but you can control your action and your mindset. And that's the most important things to get you off the starting blocks towards your financial freedom goals, right? Yeah, and that's what I was like, got to get cash flow. Let's go.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome that you rolled the dice for yourself. You backed yourself. You backed your own ability. So, okay, you're moving through some of those smaller deals. what happened? Like, what was the progression from there, and where are we time wise there? When?
That was end of 2000, so 2012, 2013. Bought a couple of little deals. I then bought a property in Philadelphia with a partner,
Yep.
and we flipped it. It was a 2-story row house,
Yep.
but the house next door was 3 stories, so we put a 3rd floor on top.
Yep.
Into early 2014, we moved to LA because Erica had enough of New York City.
Yeah.
And I was sort of doing that. It too cold. I was doing the flip from afar. That went terribly. Actually, had my dad, it was my first ever money. I got my dad involved in that deal. The GC was stealing stuff from us. He was just, we weren't, the numbers made sense, but the GC ended up screwing us a lot.
Okay, so GC, general contractor?
General contractor, yep. And he was stealing stuff. He was just taking too bloody long. And we sold it really quickly once we got the project done, but it should have taken 6 months. It ended up taking more like 18 months.
Right.
And that's where, holding costs and interest just eats you alive.
Yeah.
But it was my first lesson in making sure, my dad's involved in the deal. He gets his money back. I had to dip into my own pocket to make sure he was made whole. And then I made sure he got a return on his money because I promised it to him.
Yeah.
Now I didn't get it. I lost a little bit of money on that deal, but I didn't take a hosing for it. And I made sure my investors were made whole, even when things go bad.
Yeah.
And so early in my career, there's a few little things like those 2 or 3 properties I bought in upstate New York. I didn't lose any money on them. Actually made a little bit of money, made cash flow. And so I sold them to buy the flip. The flip didn't go that great, but again, it got me to deal number 4. And then from there, I was able to use whatever I had left into building a brand and building a business around what I was doing. Yeah. And that's where I started the podcast, Investing in the US. And that's been going for 6 years now. So
okay, yeah. So back then, so you've done 4 deals. Some have gone okay. Like you've had a bit of drama along the way there, learned a few lessons, and then you've got to the point where you thought, I can really lock into this for a lengthier period. And it's interesting because I've worked with thousands of different businesses in my other businesses that I own, and it's quite common that anybody who starts something, they initially start and they're very transactional based. So they want to just get that deal and get the money from that. And then those that survived shift from being transactionally based to more relationship based.
Yep.
So they get out of they want to make money out of each deal, but it's not a desperation or a do or die on each deal. It's more of, okay, how is this going to affect my business for the next 10, 20 years? Yep. How is it going to affect my investors for the next 10 or 20 years? So it sounds like you made a similar type of shift after kind of deal number 4.
Yeah, well, actually, it was through a conversation I had with a very good friend of mine who came at the end of 2013. I still remember this conversation today. He comes to New York City before moving to LA. And at the point, I just had bought that little house in Philly that it was just about to start flipping. I had about six units up in upstate New York. I was, boasting to him it was for Chrissy Beer. And I said, mate, I got these great little properties. And he's like, good on you, Reed. And we'd actually studied together in University of Queensland. He's from Vancouver and he's an engineer as well. And he said to me, I just closed on a 70 unit deal. And I said, 70, like 70. And he's like, yeah, 70. And I said, how the fuck did you do that? And he went, and he was doing all the same things I was doing, buying it, putting in a bit of renos to the units, and then increasing the rent by $150 a month.
Yep.
But he had scale where I only had 6 units. I wasn't scaling that much. Oh. He had the scale. And I sort of said, well, how'd you do that? And he said, well, I had got a mentor. I got seller carryback finance on the property, and I raised a bit of money from friends and family. And I said, and I'd been hearing that all this other people's money, syndication and OPM and, seller carryback financing, and knew that commercial was probably where I was going to go because that was a scale part of it.
Yeah.
But again, it was one of those conversations that the penny dropped, and it was like, well, if he can do it, why can't I do it? And that was really where I challenged myself to say, okay, well, let's liquidate the stuff in upstate New York. Let's focus on, I needed to get a mentor. And I will say at that point, Peter, I'd been putting off getting a mentor for a long period of time. I thought, this is a bunch of, malarkey, a lot of crap, I'll just go out and do it myself and figure it out. But that's what I really realized where the rubber hits the road. All good sport athletes, have coaches. You need someone in your court. You need someone who you aspire to, but you need someone to be sort of your sounding board, right? And you need to, I ended up paying for my mentor, but that payment was a payment in myself, right? I said, I'm going to go use this money to help me be better at what I'm doing, right? Because I was sort of,
Yeah.
flailing around a little bit,
Yeah.
and that's where I got my mentor, and that's where, okay, well, he wasn't that experienced either, but he was in my sort of age bracket, and he was, he'd done one or two bigger deals. I'm talking 150 units. And that's where he sort of said to me, like, Reed, you got to start raising capital, because and you've got something to say. And that was that you've gone through this experience. You're an Aussie, you're coming here, you've got a great story, you've got a great pitch. Other people will be interested in what you have to say. And this is end of 2014. And I say, okay, well, what do we do? So, try podcasting. And that's where the podcast started. And from there, it was probably my grandma and my mum just listening to it. But that was, I documented the journey, and people started really, really getting interested in it. And I started, unbeknownst to me, building a personal brand and trust, and being vulnerable and talking about the failures, but also interviewing other experts about certain elements in the business. And through that, I was able to open doors. And through that, I was able to grow my network. So, and again, I was a structural engineer. I had no idea about personal branding or marketing or talking into a podcast. But I did it, right? I did it. I just had to put myself out there and say, okay, well, I've got to find the money. And then once I find the money, I can go and invest in deals and help raise money with my mentor.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. And so I did. So that was a step into commercial, was trying to raise capital on his deals. And I failed a little bit at the beginning, but I started to get grease the wheels, and the momentum started to build. And I did a couple of deals with him, and then I eventually was able to break off and do my own deals. And that's where I founded a company with my business partner today, Wildhorn Capital. And we have about 2,500 units, about 350 million assets under management. And that started, 2015. So 6 years ago. So it's now a lot of hard work in there. I forgot to mention, when I moved to LA, I got the job. I quit engineering and I got a job with a developer. And that was really key in, again, helping me launch, be in the business and be surrounded by massive wealthy people that you would never even heard of. They don't have books, they don't have podcasts, but they own half of LA. You know what I mean? And so I was in that sort of, you surround yourself with people you aspire to be, and your game just goes up another level. It was the mentor helped me somewhat, but it was also really combined with changing that day job and that corporate gig to be in a really awesome, ruthless environment where we were doing ground up construction here in LA. And then I was learning from some of the wealthiest people that I've ever met in my entire life. You know what I mean? So that really helped. And then doing my deals on the side, and then building that momentum to build Wildhorn, and then eventually getting to a point where I was like, okay, I can replace my W2, my income, and I can go off and do this full time.
Do your own thing. So let's just get in a little bit of the detail of that. So you've come back to LA. It's obviously a lot warmer. You're working a day job with the developer. You're meeting some interesting people. So then, just in that journey of, were the investors that you were bringing in then, were they mainly American investors, or were they Australian, or were they both? Or
bit of both. Again, my podcast on the side, my boss really didn't know anything about that type of stuff. It was so small. I was raising $2,000-$3,500 on deals with my mentor. And I did probably 3 of them over a period of 2 years, enough just to sort of keep the brand going and the ticker. But then I was also trying to do, find other deals on my own that I could do myself, 50, 60, 70 unit deals in sort of Dallas, in Texas, where it's a little bit more affordable. So I was trying to work the day job, keep the investors, keep priming the investors, and then trying to, underwrite deals in Dallas whilst, still having a life, which was a lot. And that's when I brought on my first sort of little assistant to start underwriting deals. And it just sort of had to systemize it. So back to your original question, I was raising money from people in my network who I'd met, majority Americans, but had a few Aussies coming on board as well. And they were getting involved in these earlier deals that I wasn't really captaining the ship on. It was my mentor, but it was enough to give me that social proof again, that I was rubbing shoulders in these bigger deals, 250, 300 unit deals in Texas, and getting good cash flow from them. And my investors, the half a dozen I had, we were happy. So that got me started again. Proof that I could do it, right? Proof that I could raise a bit of money. Okay, this has got some validity here. If I keep working on these couple of things and I can tweak the machine a little bit, maybe I can, 1, go out and do it on my own, and 2, raise more money. And that's that was the progression from there.
Yeah, it sounds like too that there's almost like there's two kinds of proof. There's proof to people that you can do it, and then there's also proof to yourself that
Yes.
you've had an idea, you've got some dreams, you've executed on it, you've failed and picked yourself back up, you've kept going, and then you've started to succeed with it. So there's that social proof, but then there's probably a more valuable proof, which is the self-confidence that you build.
Yeah, and I use the word social proof probably too loosely. It is the self-confidence that all that matters, right? I don't really give a flying F about who judges me or not, but it's about me internally from my mindset to say, yeah, I just did that. Like pat on the back, and you don't need to boast, but like more like in the Australian way, like, all right, let's go do it again.
Yeah.
And get back on the horse.
Yeah, and it's kind of like there's a real satisfaction in knowing yourself that you've behaved ethically, you've looked after people, you've delivered what you've said, and you can put your head on your pillow at night and sleep easy.
Yeah, exactly. And that comes through the personal brand, and going back around a little bit, the personal brand, leading with that personal brand, like that's the trust and transparency you got to build with investors, because they invest in you first and foremost. The deal's actually secondary.
Yeah,
it doesn't even. The deal could be on the moon. You know what I mean? Like it's like, as long as they trust you with their money, and you're going to do the right thing by them, and that is all that matters. And that's the hardest thing to build, is trust in the beginning. And that's why you go partner with other people who've done it before to help you build that credibility to say, hey, I've not done this big deal yet. But my partners have, and they've got a new deal that maybe you want to come and invest in, and maybe something you're interested in. Oh yeah, it looks interesting. That's great. Thank you very much for inviting me into this opportunity. So that helps build the trust. And then you work with them. Hey, do you know of any other investors? Okay, I've got some other people that I know, and they start introducing you more people. Then the other side of it was like, okay, well, I don't want to play second fiddle to my mentor forever. I want to be my own boss.
Yeah.
Let's go do it myself. And that's, again, the pushing the boundary, pushing the envelope to try and always challenge yourself to do and be more.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a great segue into the next thing I was going to ask you, which is currently you have 2,500 units, you have $350 million under management. What's next?
Yeah. What's next? And people ask me, just getting to the end of the day job was such a big North Star for such a long period of time.
Yeah.
Now I've got a business, been in it for a couple of years now. We've just hired our first couple of employees. It got to a point where the business can be self-sustaining to pay those employees from the fees we get. It's now about growing a sustainable business. It's now about growing it into making sure that my investors get returns. Now we're getting to a point where investors now saying to us, okay, Reed, that's all well and good. You've been in this business for a little while. Where's the cycles? Where are you coming with the cycles? And that's where we're actually going to sell 2 deals now in March. We can put those skins on the wall and say that was the return to investors. And that's going to help grow the business even more. And it's that snowball effect. I don't have a goal of 10,000 units or 20,000 units, but I have a goal of being a sustainable business and somewhere where investors can trust and they get good returns across, multifamily assets in Central Texas. I may diversify into other asset classes, being my background in ground up development, or maybe doing self-storage, but everything with cash flow related to it in real estate is where I'm interested in that. And continue to build the brand and continuing to build the awareness of helping others, achieve somewhat, place money into these real estate deals, which, you go back 20 years ago, direct investment into these syndications wasn't even a thing. Right. And so many people, it's been such a massive with crowdfunding and online platforms like that, been such a massive influx in people trying to, invest directly with operators like myself. And that's been such an incredible opportunity to allow other people, one, to grow my worth, but, my net worth and value, but also to help others do the same thing as well. And it's really a win-win situation for everyone involved. So don't have a really North Star at the moment, besides really trying to be sustainable in the way I grow and don't get too far out of over your skis. Yeah. But also goes back to a little bit to what I said earlier. I'm 34 going on 35. 10 years ago, I probably only was just thinking about moving to the United States. Yeah. In 10 years time, don't sweat the future as well. The last 10 years have been pretty freaking awesome. You've got the resolve to create this from nothing. Yeah. The next 10 years, the next 20 years is going to be even better. So just that goes back to that self-confidence of, whatever happens will happen for a reason, and you'll go make the most of it. So
and what I really like about what I'm hearing from you too, Reed, is that, and this is why I think your business is very sustainable, is that you seem equally as interested in how your investors are going to perform as to how you're going to do out of it yourself. And I mean, the
Correct.
next level of that, which you've started now, is getting employees in, and you're equally as interested in their careers and their progression as you are in the growth of your business.
Yep, exactly. No, and the other thing I'll add is, real estate is a great vehicle for wealth creation, but I also truly believe that vertical integration within business is just 10x's that growth for everyone involved. No, not just me as the CEO and owner, but the employees, the investors, and it's diversifying the portfolio and within the business. So if something goes wrong, we have a COVID again, you're not buying deals, you've got other things to lean on, and you can keep the doors open. You can keep everyone, keep the ship moving forward, which is really important. And I think, sort of getting a little bit off track, but what has happened in 2020 has really solidified that for me moving forward in the next iteration of the business.
Yeah, I mean, 2020 has been an interesting experience. And I think for a lot of people, it's been super tough. It's been super tough. But then there's another group of people who are quite astute, and they've just taken stock of themselves and said, okay, well, stuff can be thrown at me that I don't like. I've still got to just play the cards that I'm dealt. Correct. And I think it's those that can play the cards that they've dealt, rather than get too much at the effect of what's going on, are going to prosper for the next decade.
100%. Exactly. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, great. Hey, so good. Thanks for coming on the show. It's been great listening to your journey and hearing, there's some really interesting stuff in there that I'm sure people are going to love to listen to. So in terms of people getting in touch with you, I mean, obviously investors can get in touch with you. Do you do any personal mentoring yourself?
We do. We have a couple of platforms we've got opened up. It's called the Multifamily MBA. We have it's a really a mastermind for people who are aspiring to be operators. We have a bit of a higher barrier to entry than, it's not just we take anyone off the street. You got to have a sort of a level of clout that can be to come into that. So we have that. That's sort of on the side. But yeah, if people want to reach out, the easiest way is just go to reedgoossens.com. That's reedgoossens.com.
Yep. You
can find the podcast. I've got 2 books up there. You can find audio books of that. You can find everything you want, and you can reach out to me. Info, that's info at reedgoossens.com.
Yeah, okay. And also, if somebody wants to get in touch with you, they can contact me, and I'll put them on to you as well. Yep. Yeah. So anyway, thanks again for being on the show. It's been really interesting talking to you. You're a very inspirational guy. I love the energy. It's kind of like when I think of you, I think of a guy who is standing there, he has an idea, he sees a gap, and he just jumps, and then he looks back and goes, "Hey, I did it."
I love that analogy. Exactly. Well, mate, look, thank you so much, and I think you're doing an incredible job, and I just can't wait to see the success of the podcast go from strength to strength.
Yeah, thanks, mate. Cheers, buddy.